required. If you are using a program such as Grammarly, the Grammarly plugin, which wouldn't mean anything for us in computer science, but for those of you perhaps taking, a U.S. history or a world history or something like that, or economics, the Grammarly plugin must be disabled. Okay, so keep that in mind. Brittany, it's not a mock exam with like questions. It's just to get you to be comfortable, to familiarize yourself with the format, the website, the submission process, and all that stuff. Okay, they strongly recommend that you are at least 30 minutes early to the exam, meaning you've logged into your appropriate account, and you've gone to the link that they've provided and all those things 30 minutes before the exam starts. Okay. It's not so much a mock exam, Brittany, as it is a demo. Okay, that's what they're calling it. And I'll post the link for all this stuff later today. So again, they want you to also be reminded of the fact that it is open note, open book, but you only have 40 minutes for the exam. You get 5 minutes to submit each question. So technically the whole thing will be about 50 minutes, plus they want you on a half hour early just to make sure everything is working, you're good to go. So all in all, the whole thing will be an hour and 20 minutes tops, okay? Let's see, what else can I share with you? You'll have an e-ticket will be sent out by email. You should receive that e-ticket 2 days prior to the exam. If you don't get the email, it will be on your My AP account. So just continue to log into your My AP account on the College Board website and just be exploring it, checking things out, see if you're getting any notifications and things of that nature, okay? I also want to remind you, and I've posted it on more than one occasion now, that there are live YouTube videos of instructors who teach this course in different parts of the country. So they're posting review videos as well. And those YouTube videos, which are live, you can attend them live, or you can just go back and watch them after the live session is finished. So they have, in the neighborhood of 20 videos, and they have them for every single subject. So I posted a link to the APCSA channel. They may have like 40 videos that seem to be available, but some of them are not available yet. They just have the link to those already set up for that live session. So if you click on a video and it says, hasn't started yet, that just means that session is, in the somewhat near-term future, okay? But there's a lot of good videos in there already. So, if you're somebody who's striving for that 5, you want to soak up all of the resources you have available to you, okay? I've been very, very lenient with the amount of work that I've given. So I'm hoping, I'm putting the onus on you, for those of you who are seeking that 5, to absorb all of those materials, because it's difficult for me at this time to assign a certain amount of work, not knowing what type of situation each individual is in at this point. Okay, so I've been very light on the work, but I do ask that with that you really do give your best effort in the work that I'm asking you to do, and make sure it's in on time. Like, for example, today's assignment, you had about 2.5, 3 days to complete it, and it was 1 free response question. I mean, in theory, on the day of an exam, you get 15 minutes, you get 22.5 minutes under normal circumstances for an FRQ. So let's say you're being a bit more thorough. The question shouldn't take you more than an hour. So essentially, you've been given an hour's worth of work for one, from my particular class over the course of 2.5 to 3 days. I think that's more than reasonable. I'm going to start assigning a little bit more work, nothing crazy, but just a small uptick in the amount of work that I'm assigning, because I just get the sense that some of your other AP teachers, are maybe they're just assigning their normal course load, and some of you feel like you prioritize it based on the amount of work that you get, and that's fair. So sometimes I just feel like this class gets put on the back burner for a number of you. Not saying all of you or even the majority of you, but some of you that seems to be the case. Okay. All right then. And again, if you're dealing with any personal issues that you feel like I need to be aware of, but if you're embarrassed, you certainly shouldn't be embarrassed. Please send me a private, an email to my school email, or you can communicate it through your guidance counselor, who will of course share that with me, just so that I know what's going on, with your life and everything that's been going on, so I can take all that into account when I'm assigning grades and things like that. Okay. All right. So the fifth marking period, or second marking period of the second semester, is over. We effectively have really 2 weeks in the last marking period, and then we'll sort of take our foot off the gas. We'll go back and we will look at the rest of chapter 9 and 10 with the rest of our school year, but at a much more relaxed pace, so that you can then focus on your other classes. So I ask you that during these 2 weeks, you try to really put this class at the forefront, and then of course any other AP that you have. And I promise you that when these 2 weeks are up, if you have many other things that you need to focus on other than this class, then that would be the time to then refocus your attention to that, and I'm more than okay with that. Okay. All right. So let's begin with the horse class and horse barn class, a question that we looked at much earlier in the school year. And maybe it was very, very easy for you, and maybe it wasn't so easy. And that's where I find the value in actually going back and redoing FRQs for a third, fourth, fifth time. You tend to forget the solution. Things become familiar to you. And I'm going to point one of those skills out later in the review of the question that I think could be very beneficial for us if this similar scenario pops up. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with all of you. Okay. All right. So we were given not 2 classes, but we were given an interface, and interfaces were taken off the exam. So you don't really have to worry about what an interface is. I just made it as a class, so so that I could put it into Replit and everybody would understand what it is. I also instructed you to check out AP CS Awesome, Chapter 6, which goes into the full setup of how to set up, the horse class, how to set up the horse barn class, and to get all that to, be totally comprehensive, so that you could run your code for parts A and B and actually test them accurately. So we see we have this horse interface. I'm just going to call it a horse class instead. So we have public class horse. We have 2 private instance variables, the horse name, which is a string, the horse's weight, which is an int. Then we have just a very straightforward constructor, which initializes the 2 private instance variables, name and weight. So we have the 2 formal parameters, name with a capital N, weight with a capital W. Those values are passed to the private instance variables, name and weight, with the lowercase n and the lowercase w. We have 2 methods that were given to us, get name, get weight, and we're told in the problem how they work. Very straightforward. They get the name and they get the weight of the horse object. Now, I've also included a 2-string method here so that if I'm going to print information about a horse, I don't have to invoke the get name and get weight methods. So I can just simply say system.out print and then the name of that horse object variable that or rather the name of the variable that refers to the horse object. So it would print name, the horse's name, weight, and the horse's weight. Okay. All right. So on to the horse barn class, which is our area of focus, because the horse barn class contains the two methods that we were tasked with writing the implementation for. So in the problem itself, we see the horse barn class. We're told a horse barn consists of n number of numbered spaces. Each space can hold at most one horse. The spaces are indexed starting from 0. The index of the last space is n-1. No two horses in the barn have the same name. The declaration of the horse barn class is shown below. You will write two unrelated methods of the horse barn class. Now, that's not entirely true that they're unrelated, because in fact, in part B, we're going to make a call to the I'm sorry. I was just doing another problem. What was it? I was doing another FRQ from 2007 where we actually made a call to the method from part A. So yes, these are two completely unrelated methods. You will not be making a call to the find horse space method in the consolidate method. That's not necessary and not required. So we can see that in the horse barn class, we have one private instance variable. We have this variable spaces, which is an array of horse objects, okay? And then we have the two methods that we're going to write, find horse space and consolidate. So the find horse space method, we're told it returns the index of the space that contains the horse with the specified name. So given some name, we're going to find that horse in the array, and then we're going to return its position, return its index. Now, if that particular horse is not found, then -1 will be returned if no horse with a specified name is in the barn. Okay? All right, so let's take a look at our solution here. So first up, we are using just a standard for loop, okay? Just a standard for loop. Now, why would we, and notice, of course, that in this just very standard for loop here, we're starting at index 0. We're looping through the entire array one by one until we've reached the end of the array. So in this case, you might think to yourself, oh, this would be or could be a good opportunity to use a for each loop. Why would it be difficult or rather impossible to use a for each loop here? What's the problem? Or is there one? So I'm going to say that there's a problem in us trying to use the for each loop. Why would there be an issue in trying to use a for each loop here? Yeah, Jaswinder. So I think Matthew's got it. You can't get the index. That's correct. What are we returning here? What does this method return? Right, it returns an int, right, the index of that horse. And of course, we know that a for each loop does not have an index variable. So if we use the for each loop, then there's no way of us returning the index of that particular element. So it makes it much more doable to answer this question. Maybe there is a way to use a for each loop, but it would certainly be much more difficult in doing so, because the for each loop abstracts away the index variable. So we have our index variable here, which is what we are returning. And probably the basic solution you may have come up with was if spaces at I. So remember, arrays and array lists have different notation, okay? So spaces at I dot get name, spaces at I dot get name. So the spaces at I gets the horse object from the array. Now remember, a horse object has two pieces of information, a string, which is its name, and an int, which is its weight. So spaces at I gets the object. It doesn't physically, get the name. We have to make a call to the get name method in order to get the name from the object. Once we do that, we invoke the dot equals method to test for string equivalence. And the actual parameter that's placed inside dot equals is name, whatever name is passed through when a call to the find horse space method is used. So if that name is equal to the name that's retrieved from the horse object, then you are going to return I. And again, we talked about this maybe about a week ago. Return within the context of, let's say, a loop, which it is in line 17, acts as a form of a break in many cases. So you're breaking from the loop. You're not going to continue to loop through, which would cause problems, of course. So let's just say at index 3, the horse's name is found. At that particular moment in time, you want to return I, your index. If the return didn't act as a break from the loop, then you would continue to loop through, and what would happen is the name that you've passed through as the parameter, right, would not match the element at position 4 or position 5 or however long the array is. So if the return didn't act as a break, the only way this method would work would be if, or when I say work, the only way it would return the proper index is if the last element was or matched the parameter that you gave it, okay? So remember, when you use the keyword return in the context of a loop, it breaks from the loop, okay? It breaks from the loop. All right, so after going through or iterating through the entire data structure, the array called spaces, if the conditional here between lines 15 and 18, if that never executes, then instead of returning I, we return -1, okay? And returning -1 is sort of like returning false, or saying, it's another way of saying whatever you were looking for, isn't here. Okay, so that's part A. I think pretty straightforward. I'm sorry. Let's actually go ahead and run it. Okay, and notice we get this index of trigger should be 0 and is 0, so that worked out. And then we get this exception in the thread main null pointer exception. What happened here? Why did we get a null pointer exception, and how can we fix it? Yes, we are not permitted to reference the null keyword, or we're not allowed to reference a null, an element that is holding, a reference to null. So what we need to do is we need to bring that set of code back that we had that will prevent us from checking an element that is null. Okay, so it'll basically just skip over it and continue to loop through. So we're going to add that back in. So if spaces at null is not equal, if spaces at I is not equal to null and spaces at I dot get name dot equals name, then you'll return I, okay? But if an element is null, then you're going to just iterate, you're going to I++, you're going to iterate, continue to iterate through the array until you've finished iterating through the array, okay? So essentially, the element at position 1 and element at position 4 will be skipped over, all right? We will retrieve the element we'll see that it's null, and we'll then just move on to the next one. And in this case, this will prevent us from receiving this feedback of null pointer exception. So now when I run my code, we don't get that error. And we can see the index of trigger should be 0 and is 0. Index of silver is 2 and is 2. And the index of cocoa should be -1 and is -1, because of course cocoa is not in the array. Okay, so now let's take a look at our consolidate method. And we're told consolidates the barn by moving horses so that the horses are in adjacent spaces. That means next to each other, starting at index 0 with no empty space between any two horses. Post condition, the order of the horses is in the same as before the consolidation. Okay, so to me, the biggest takeaway from this whole problem is that if you get a question that's similar to this, where you have to rearrange data in an array, you might be best suited to declare and initialize a new array, which you can use as a placeholder, okay? Now, in this particular question, the return type is void. So we're not actually returning the array, or any array for that matter. But what we are doing is we're rearranging the data within the array. And the easiest thing to do in this particular case, in this example, is we're going to introduce a new array, and we're going to use the length of the original array to create the length of the new array, okay? That way they're the exact same size or length. We say size for lists, we say length for arrays. Now, in doing so, at the very end of the method, we're going to, when I say we're going to not switch them back over, but we're going to copy what's in the new array. We're going to copy those contents over to the old array, okay? So let's go ahead and take a look at this. So right here in line 28, we've declared and initialized a new array called new spaces of the same type, horse, okay, is assigned to new horse, and then spaces.length just represents an integer. Spaces is the length of, spaces.length represents an integer of how many elements there are in the spaces array. Now, here's the trickiest part of this question. Because we're dealing now with two different arrays, we need two different index variables. We know that for the new array, which is, when I say blank, it's not really blank. So let's come back to line 28. After line 28 is evaluated, we'll say, what is being held in the array, new spaces? Anything at all? Is it just a blank empty hole? Is there anything in there at all? So what's in the new spaces array after that line of code is read and executed? Correct. Correct. Very good, Brittany. And that's very important. So we're going to have, in the new array, we're going to have the keyword null at each position. So if we're doing this in the context of the example that was given, where we had 7 horses, okay, 7 horse objects at spaces 0 through 6. What we want trigger, silver, lady, patches, and duke to be at position 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we want the 2 null spaces to be at the end, at positions 5 and at position 6. So they're all null to begin with. We're just simply going to reassign. We're going to reassign the element at positions 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4 to trigger with its, trigger with its weight, silver with its weight, lady with its weight, patches with its weight, and duke with its weight, okay? So we need 2 index variables. One that is going to iterate no matter what, because we're going to iterate through the original array spaces no matter what, okay? We're going one by one and we're checking to see if it's null and if it's not null, and then do something based on that feedback we get. The other index variable, we only want to increase if the element we've just evaluated from the original array is not null. Because if it's not null, then we want to put it in our new array. And then we'll index plus plus and move on over to the next space. But we don't want to index plus plus if the element we've just evaluated from the original array is null, because that'll defeat the purpose of the whole consolidate method, and thus the new array will look exactly like the old one, and that's not what we want. So we have these two index variables. In line 30, we have the index variable index, which is assigned to 0. And I'll make a comment here, index for new spaces array, okay? And we can see them used in the context of the conditional as well. Notice that I'm assigning new spaces at position index to spaces at position I. So we're looping through the entire spaces array one by one. And if the element at position I in the original array is not null, then we're going to assign new spaces at position index to the element that we've just evaluated. And of course, then we will increase index plus plus. Now, and then of course, I will increment no matter what because it's in the for loop header here. So we continue to iterate through, and the spaces at those indices index will get a horse object, assuming the element at spaces at I is not null. And then in the final line of the method, we've reassigned spaces to new spaces, okay? And that's all there is to it. So if we go to the main method, and we take a look at, these lines down here. So system.out_print before the consolidate, and then we're printing out sweet home, which is the name of my horse barn, sweet home.consolidate, and then system.out_print after the consolidate, sweet home, or system.out_print sweet home. Okay, so let's go ahead and run it, and we'll take a look. Okay, so this is before the consolidation. That's our original horse barn, and that's precisely what was given to us in the example. So if we take a look, trigger is at position 0, silver at 2, lady at 3, patches at 5, duke at 6, null is at position 1 and 4. So that's precisely what's presented here. And then after the consolidate, it should be trigger, silver, lady, patches, and duke. Remember, the order in which they appear should be the same, meaning lady and silver are not going to be, flip-flopped. Lady is not going to come before silver. Duke is not going to come before patches. They must remain in the same order. It's just simply that the null spaces are moved to the end. And that is exactly what we see. Trigger, silver, lady, patches, and then duke. Okay, so great success. Not too bad of a problem. You may also notice that a toString method was used in the horse barn problem, or sorry, in the horse barn class. And again, I just pulled this one from the APCS Awesome. If you went into that online textbook, it actually gave you, a pretty comprehensive template for what you could use in order to test out the implementation for Part A and Part B. So no need to really worry about this. I have not seen a question where you were asked to write a toString method. But again, you may want to, become more than just familiar with using the toString method if, in fact, you plan on using an IDE on the day of the exam and using it to really test your code, which is going to be, not an easy thing to do given the time constraint. So that's it for the horse barn problem. Before we move on to the next thing, are there any questions? What do you mean, Rachel? That's okay. Oh, Rachel. Kayla. Sorry. What do you mean, Kayla? Like, how do we know what goes in the horse file and the main file? So I guess, well, if you take, I'll share my screen again. So you're not going to be given an interface. If this question was given to you, you would just be given two classes. So we'll just think of it as we're given a horse class and we're given a horse barn class. So in my Replit account, I have my horse class, okay? And I have my horse barn class, right? And I mean, each of those classes, they're basically the same as the ones that were given in the problem. I just added a couple of things like the toString method, so that a nice, clean, representation of the object would print out without me having to invoke all these different types of methods, okay? The main method is, right, that's our test, also known as like the tester method. So everything that you see in the main method, these are things that I took from the problem. So like where it says method call, sweethome.findHorseTrigger, sweethome.findHorseSilver, sweethome.findHorseCocoa, value return. Like these are things that I have right here. So sweethome.findHorseSpaceTrigger, sweethome.findHorseSilver, and I just wrote this stuff out because this is what was put in APCS Awesome. You didn't have to have this, but it just makes it a little bit easier on the eyes because we know that trigger is at position 0. So if I concatenate this with a string, index of trigger should be 0 and is, right? Because sweethome.findHorsespace is going to return an integer. So if it prints out 0 or returns 0 rather, then it matches up and we know we're good to go. Okay. All this stuff here was just me creating the different horse objects, me then adding them to their appropriate locations. This was me just testing out the toString method from the horse class that printed out the sweet home. So this was line 17, printed out everything that you see right here, what appears to be sort of like the first paragraph. And then this next set of SOPs, system.out_prints, is for what you see in the second paragraph here, so to speak. And then we have the before the consolidate and then after the consolidate. And you're not going to necessarily be explicitly told what to put in a main method to where you test things, but when they have like part A, part B, and they show you, oh, here's an example of how the method is to be used, and here's what the value should be that is returned, those are the things that you're going to have to adapt into your main method, okay? So sometimes they're nicely laid out, kind of like how it is here. I think this is pretty straightforward. sweethome.findHorseSpaceTrigger should return 0, and so on and so forth, okay? And then for part B, it shows you what the array will look like before the consolidate, and it shows you what the array will look like after the consolidate, okay? Now it doesn't lay it out the same way it does in part A, where it would say sweethome.consolidate, that kind of thing. You're just going to have to know, that's like just something you're going to have to know if you're going to, utilize the main method to test your code before and after. Okay. Kayla, does that answer your question? Okay, great. Any other questions before we move on to the next thing? Okay, so our next question that we're going to do is another question that we've actually done in the past. It's the self-divisor question. It's one of the first FRQs that we did. Oh, okay. I was just confused because I didn't see if I was going to put it all together. Yeah, it's just a little bit different filing structure, Kayla. That's all. They're just, it's not something that you have to worry about necessarily for the AP exam. But if you're going to use Replit, you just have to know that they, for whatever reason, they automatically create this main class that only has the main method in it, and they don't want you putting the main method in the other classes. That's all. Okay. So everything that you test will just go in the main method. That's it. Or in the main class, which goes in the main method. Okay. It's just, I understand it's a little bit different than the APCS Awesome. All right. So the next problem we're going to work on is from 2007. So I'll just type it in here. Of course, I'll post it on our page. 2007, number 1, FRQ. Self-divisor is the theme or the title. Hopefully this sounds familiar to all of you. So part A doesn't really have to do with an array, but it's certainly good practice. It's probably more similar to like methods and control structures. Having a good understanding of how to use a loop, how to use conditional statement, how to use the modulus operator, how to manipulate a number using temp variables. So these are all key concepts for part A. Part B does require you to make a call to the method that you've implemented in part A and has to do with using an array. So that's our next question, which I am going to assign right after this. And that question will be due tomorrow night, okay? So I'm not going to give you the whole weekend to do it. It's an old question that we've done in the past. It shouldn't take you more than 30 to 40 minutes to do it. Hour, I guess, in some circumstances at most. So that's what we'll have due by tomorrow night at midnight. And over the weekend, if you have an opportunity to, maybe you have other things to work on. But again, please go back and start watching those videos that they're posting on YouTube. Okay? Please watch those videos. We only have 33 people in today's conference call out of a total of 85 students. So that's not great attendance today, and we only have 2 weeks to go. So I'm counting on all of you, but I'm certainly counting on the 33 of you that are here that I know are taking this seriously and that are able to. Again, I did state earlier that I know everyone's in a different situation right now, and I am empathetic towards that. But at the same time, we don't want to let a good opportunity get by if we are in a good place. So if your family is healthy, you're healthy, and all that stuff, we want to use this as an opportunity to accomplish something that we can be proud of, and that I know that all of you come July, when you get those scores back, will feel really good about it, knowing that you put in the hard work. So it's 2 weeks left. Don't give up now. Keep working hard. Be honest with yourself, and get working on that 2007 question. And please, I do some things early in the morning, but other than that, I'm pretty much home the rest of the day. So I check my email constantly throughout the day. Maybe every other hour or so. I'm eager to help all of you accomplish your goals. So if there's a problem, if you have a question, just email me at any time, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Okay, I'm pretty good with that stuff. So that's it for today, unless you have some other questions. Get working on 2007 number 1. I'll post that up on the Google Classroom page, and that will be due at 11:59 p.m. tomorrow.